Let's get some reaction now from Kgothatso Sibanda, Help Desk Manager at Black Sash, Kidi Mofube, who's the chairperson of the Gauteng Older Persons Forum, and Phelisa Nkomo, who's a developmental economist. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for being with us on the show. Perhaps let me start with Kgothatso, just to get a sense of your response following the various ministers stepping on the podium yesterday and trying to give us some sort of clarity on how this disaster happened.
I think we're quite disappointed with what the ministers have said yesterday. I mean, they mentioned that, especially the post office CEO mentioned that about 600,000 people were affected by this. However, in that 600,000 people, only 500,000 people were refunded. So we're still remaining with a 10% of people that have not been refunded yet. They had not addressed the issue as to when will that 10% be refunded or their transaction be reversed. When can they go into the post bank or post office or ATMs or retail and to assure that their money is available.
Kidi, let me perhaps get some feedback and reaction from you. What did you make of the minister's assertions?
To me, it's a lack of management. People don't know what they're doing. And, they know that older persons, they need this money. It's not like them where they earn big monies. With older persons, they wait patiently for the day they get a grant.
Yeah.
Some of them, they even live far away from the pay points. They have to borrow money to go to the pay points. And to their surprise, there was nothing for them to get. For me, it's just an excuse. And I think this is what we are going to be getting going forward. Thank you.
Phelisa, bringing you into the conversation, we heard the minister saying that no refunds will be given to those who've had to go out of their way to borrow money or, really learning of the disappointment that the money is not in their accounts. What does this now indicate to you as an economist, a developmental economist, as you assess the situation?
Well, I mean, it's actually a very sad, by the way, because as Mom Kidi is actually saying, a lot of people, even before they actually get their grant, they've already accumulated local debts. They've already borrowed 50 rand from someone else, 20 rand from someone else, 120 from someone else. So they really actually need the resources. That's one. The second issue is the fact that I do think that the ministers actually need to take South Africans into confidence around what type of this technical glitch was. I mean, it's true we don't expect South Africans to be IT specialists, but we must just say exactly what type of glitch is this one, because then in essence, part of the credibility of the storyline that the ministers are actually giving is linked to the quality of the communication they're giving to South Africans. It's true that it is an inconvenience, particularly to elders, but also to women. I mean, I saw in Butterworth queues of women along the banks, and I started to inquire, and the town is quite small, but I started to inquire, and people were saying, oh no, we're waiting for our grants, but there's actually no communication in terms of what's going on. Now, obviously, you see, when working class people and poor citizens actually are not treated in a dignified way, and so the person, by dignified way, in a way that actually gives information much more earlier so that they're not inconvenienced. Because I can assure you that if there was a technical glitch, the teams at Postnet should have tested the system the night before, even before, and they can use radio. I mean, a lot of people in rural areas use radio to quickly communicate for those who are likely to be on the road. But also, we also know that there are people who normally actually go a night before the payday, because part of it is that they don't want to stand in long queues, but also they have such financial pressures that they need to deal with. So, and I do think that the signal that it's sending about the late communication or the delayed communication is that poor people are not treated in a dignified way. And hence, the ministers have to really need to take South Africans into confidence about what type of this technical glitch, but also how do they deal with what Kgotsotso was saying earlier, that there's also 100,000 that has not yet been paid, and what is the explanation with regards to that? But also, what is it that needs to be done? Because part of it, immediately, there's always a futuristic question that says, how do we then avoid this technical glitch in a way that it does not actually inconvenience the poor and the working class, and particularly women who really do unpaid social reproductive work and whom their livelihoods relied on this social security net for them to be able to provide decent meals within their own family.
Yeah, absolutely. Phelisa, you raised some very important points there. Kgotsotso, perhaps let me get some reaction from you. Phelisa speaks about the quality of communication, how it needs to be refined, and of course speaking about how much more could have been done as a preventative measure. What did you make of government's response? Do you think that there was a grasp on the impact of the seriousness when it comes to system failures on the poorest of the poor who rely on the grants?
There was no grasp from government regarding this technical glitch. And I must state that this is not the first technical glitch. Bank took over the payment of grant last year, October, and in November there were technical glitches. So it's not the first time. What we're actually calling for is an internal investigation in this technical glitches, because the public cannot be told now and then when there are issues that they're just technical glitches, they're system failures. We need to understand what entails those technical glitches and what happens in those failure of the system. And another thing is that the public is not reassured that this won't happen again. The CEO mentioned that technical glitches happen in the banking sector. So the public is not reassured that this is not going to happen in the future. And that's something that we really hoped that both ministers would address, that such things does not happen in the future. It really impacts hardly on social grant beneficiaries. The value of the grant has reduced drastically. If Ugogo receives around 2,080 rand and now has to borrow money to go to the nearest payment facility, about 5 times as this started last week, and till yesterday it was not resolved, the value of that grant drastically reduced.
Kidi, let me get some reaction from you. We know that hundreds of thousands of other beneficiaries have still not received their grants. Talk to us about the impact and what this essentially translates to those who are still waiting.
Mama, as you know, the older persons, I'm talking for the older persons here. The older persons, they are looking after their kids who are unemployed. They are also staying with the grandchildren. So you can imagine, because everyone, they are looking forward to the day when an elderly person goes and receives the grant. And the next thing, this thing happened where Gogo comes empty-handed. You can imagine, I think most of the families, they went to bed without anything to eat. Like Kgotsotso was saying, I mean, communication, bad communication. I remember, I'm in a service center now. We were called in Joburg in April to let us know that all the NPOs and their funding is terminated. I mean, in April is the beginning of the new year for DSD, social development. We were only told then. Imagine, I mean, for me, they don't care, especially older persons. We are supposed to be the vulnerable group, but they don't even take care of us. It's so sad that South Africa, we have worked so hard for South Africa to be where it is today, and they are just depleting it now. They are doing whatever they had to do. They don't care for us. That's what I can just tell you now. Thank you.
Phelisa, you speak about the importance of the quality of communication, and of course we've just witnessed the ripple effect and how it affects those who are eagerly waiting for this grant and with no other means of income. What does it now speak to when it comes to accountability, because there are still no guarantees that it won't happen again? What needs to happen?
Well, I mean, I suppose, organizations like Black Sash, where Khutazo comes from, I think they play such a crucial role to continue to hold government accountable. But also, I do think that government actually does understand their constitutional obligation. And it's true that they are actually shortchanging or not honoring that. So in essence, what really needs to happen is that they need to, and that's a role as well of civil society organization, to put pressure on government to really make it sure that they really explains to South Africans of exactly what happens. The point that Khutazo makes is that, in fact, this is not the first time the technical glitch happens. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we also understand that we're confronted with the issue of load shedding, which, in fact, now and again really interrupts the functioning of the economy, But it also means that when Postbank, for example, is given such a massive responsibility of delivering, lifeline for poor and working class communities, is to make sure that they have backup systems in place. 6 months is a long time. November until to date, they should actually, by even the first or second glitch, they should have come back and say, this is what we're planning to do to make sure that we avoid. Amongst those, here is our backup system. So I see in the statement, for instance, they're saying, no, it's taking longer because they have to do certain things manually. So it also actually means that the minister who's responsible for social development needs to demand a plan from Postbank and say, we have given you this responsibility to deliver, and this what needs to be done. I also think that the social security forum of civil society organization must just continue to put the pressure and demand not only an explanation, but fundamentally a very clear futuristic plan to make it sure that some of these glitches, won't happen again. We've seen several companies actually organizing, generators, for example, to back up their system, or if they have to deliver any service to working class and the poor, to avoid the perception that they actually don't place a lot of value in them. They work throughout the night to make sure that their systems are actually, working a day before. And I think from the Postbank perspective, it doesn't actually seem quite clear that, firstly, there's a backup plan, but also true is that it looks like this glitch was kind of like not anticipated. And you know what, in the context of load shedding, you can't not anticipate, any technical glitch, by the way. I mean, we sit in meetings, we get switched off, as often as possible. And so institutions that deliver or provide service to the poor, it's important because remember, poor people are already poorer. And the least that you need to do is that when they expect, some of their social security, that they're not even inconvenienced as a result. So I do think that, a government civil society organization needs to get into the table and actually hold government accountable and actually demand a much more better explanation. In fact, the call for much more investigation on this matter is actually a good call, that we need to understand exactly what type of glitch are we confronted with and how do we avoid inconveniencing poor people who are already inconvenienced by virtue of their location in terms of class, their geographic location, and that they actually don't have sufficient access to economic opportunities, which would then make it sure that they don't have to rely on social grant for them to sustain their livelihoods.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Phelisa Nkomo, who is a developmental economist there speaking to us, as well as Khutazo Sibanda, who's help desk manager at Black Sash, as well as Kidi Mofube, who's the chair of the Gauteng Older Persons Forum. Let me thank you all for your time.